Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, our guest is Ms. Bethany Dotson. Bethany is a relationship coach, and she has experience working with trauma survivors, and thus our invitation to have her here today. So welcome, Bethany. Can you please tell our audience more about you?
Sure. So I am a relationship coach. I'm also a trauma-sensitive yoga therapist. So I use somatic work to help clients move through relational or complex trauma, the type of trauma that happens inside of relationships, and specifically romantic partnership or intimate partner violence, to help them regulate their nervous system, heal anxiety, heal subconscious beliefs about themselves, low self-worth, lack of confidence. And I use that through working with both their mind and their body.
Perfect. Yeah, I think the mind-body connection is huge with trauma. Yeah.
Very, very, very big, very important connection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you mentioned that you offer a masterclass. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So I break down the 5 shifts that I used to help overcome my own relational trauma and unhealthy patterns in romantic relationships. And it's the same 5 shift blueprint that I walk my clients through, and they sign on to work with me together. So I offer free training to help people think differently about what they need to do in order to break a lifelong pattern of narcissistic or emotionally unavailable partners. A lot of people think they need to talk about their childhood or what happened to them in their childhood and spend 10 years in therapy. A lot of people need to believe they need to research all about the narcissist, and then that's going to bulletproof them from making the wrong choice again in the future. And so the masterclass is about what you really need to do to overcome that pattern in your love life. Yeah.
I love that. I love when things are practical. Like, okay, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Focus in these areas. So that's great.
So, yeah, that's what that class is about.
Awesome. Okay. And what about your own personal trauma story and the recovery process are you open to sharing? And I respect whatever privacy limits you have.
Sure. So I grew up witnessing domestic violence as a kid. The first 10 years of my life, my parents fought a lot, and my dad unfortunately had a very bad anger management problem and was violent. So I grew up, seeing a lot of bad things happen to my mom for the first 10 years of my life. And then when I became a teenager, I started rebelling. I really didn't know. I was just a bad kid. I didn't really know why I was rebelling, and making the wrong choices in school and things like that. And when I began dating in my teenage years and through my 20s and early 30s, I noticed I just tended to pick the wrong people. And I did, 12 years of talk therapy and talked ad nauseum about what happened when I was young. And so my trauma extends in my own childhood. And then the choices that I made, I was repeating a pattern in my own life. If I saw my mom get mistreated, and subconsciously I made the meaning that that's what love looked like, and started repeating that pattern in my own love life.
Okay. And when did you notice or became aware enough about that cycle and how to stop it? How did that happen?
I had the viewpoint for so many years. It was not about me. That it was about, that it was all my ex's fault. My ex was a narcissist. The ex before that was a narcissist. The one before that was emotionally unavailable. They had the problems. I had the viewpoint and the mindset that they were the problem. They were the problem. They had the anger management issues. I was the innocent victim in all of this. And why was life so unfair to me? That was when I did see a therapist for a time, and she was brutally honest with me. One of the first people that was like broke through my denial. And she said, this has nothing to do about your ex. Your problem is your codependency and the beliefs that you have about relationships and what love looks like. That's your problem. She was like, the men are just kind of the, they're the match for where you are right now. But, I was offended at first. I was like, how dare she? But she was right. I was taking responsibility for my own in the equation. I was blaming it on everybody else. I didn't want, I wasn't looking at what I was doing or what I was believing about myself that was causing me to get into those relationships. And once I started getting curious about what is it within me that is attracting this, rather than judging myself or beating myself up for it, then I started changing.
Yeah. What suggestions or feedback do you have from women who get stuck in just beating themselves up? How do you problem solve that?
Yeah. It's a bad habit. It's a bad habit. Beating yourself up at some point because that's what you've been used to. So it just becomes a bad program in your brain. And you can read a lot about trauma and then the borderline and do all this research. And you can talk about and logically understand why you have this problem from that came from your childhood or whatever. But you can still walk away and still beat yourself up and be really hard on yourself. So I would say working with somebody who is trauma informed, doing some kind of mind-body practice to help in that program in your brain. So mind-body, I think there are 4 or 5 proven methodologies for overcoming relational or complex trauma, and talk therapy is not one of them. But if you can do things like breath work with, guided breath work can be very intense because it can unlock a lot of repressed emotion. And some people, if they're not ready for that, can be thrown off by how intense breath work can feel. So working with a guide, a professional, movement. The work that I use in my work is yoga based, but it's not about put your leg behind your head at all. It's about noticing where you feel things in your body, very subtle things in your body, learning to pay attention and tune into your body, very basic, gentle movement. Meditation is another great thing to incorporate into your healing. Working with somebody, bottom line, work with someone who is trauma informed. Work with someone who understands complex trauma. Complex trauma is very often misdiagnosed as bipolar disorder. It's very often misdiagnosed as anxiety, and they give you medication for it. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but traditional psychiatrists and, psychotherapists might not be fully aware that what you really have is complex trauma. And a somatic or mind-body method is one of the better ways of dealing with that.
Yeah, very good. What other suggestions do you have for survivors in their healing journey other than the mind-body type of therapies?
Two things. Don't jump into another relationship right away. These might be conflicting things. Don't jump into, take at least 1 year for recovery, at least 1 year for recovery. They tell this to people who are alcoholics or who are drug addicts, that don't date for your first year in recovery. And if you have a pattern of toxic relationships, that is your own version of addiction. Those relationships are very addicting. Codependency in some schools of thought is its own addiction, love addiction. So take 1 full year. I work with people who get out of a 25-year narcissistic, highly emotionally abusive marriage, and then they want to jump on Tinder or Bumble and start dating because they don't want to feel alone.
Yes.
Even though their ex was abusive, the thought of being alone scares them like nobody's business, and they want it, and it never works. They always attract someone even more unavailable or more toxic than their ex. So take 1 year to get really solid with yourself. And then the second thing that I would tell survivors is to constantly challenge your comfort zone. One of the biggest things that I see in the women that I talk to is that they exit these types of relationships and they live a very small, stagnant life. Their ex moved on at lightning speed. They feel like something's wrong with them. They're still beating themselves up about the past. Their kids aren't making good choices in a relationship. They feel massive guilt about that. They have, and they stop living their life. It's like their life stopped when they were in that relationship. The relationship became the focal point of their life. And then once they're out of it, they just kind of coast, and they don't really have they might still have big dreams and goals in their heart, but they're so beaten down that they don't know how to make those a reality. So the second piece would be to constantly challenge yourself, whether that's, one of the things that I have my clients do when we work together is in the second week, take themselves on a date. And not just, I'm going to sit at home in my sweatpants and watch Netflix, but I'm going to get all dolled up. I'm going to make a reservation at a really nice restaurant. I'm going to put on my best lipstick. I'm going to go and treat myself to a 4 or 5 course meal. That, like, really date yourself, really go all out. Do things that challenge your comfort zone, because when the time comes for you to have a healthy relationship, that will feel very out of your comfort zone. So you want to get that conditioning in place first.
Wow. What really resonated with me is what you were saying, or my big takeaway that I think I'm not being clear in my messaging with my clients is that year break is genius. Because you're right. We do say that after addictions. I do tell my clients, take time to heal, but in their mind, they might hear that as take a couple days, take a week or two. When we know that it's taking longer. Go ahead.
Yeah, or they might have the meaning or the subconscious belief still that being alone means that there's something wrong with them. And so, yeah, we have to overcome the stories that we're telling ourselves.
Yeah. And I do a lot of cognitive behavioral work too. And I am alone is a negative core belief that many people have that likely comes from trauma, but it is definitely one of the main reasons why people end up feeling depressed and anxious, is that deep belief that I'm going to be alone. And when you teach people, well, where's the evidence of that?
Yeah.
Where's the evidence of that? And they really think about it like, well, there's not much. There really isn't much evidence that we have to be alone forever. There's lots of evidence on, because, animals count, support animals count, your children, your family, your friends. And there's always the dating apps to go to, once you're really ready, know. So I'm like, just because I'm asking you to be alone right now doesn't mean I'm asking you to be alone forever. But I think maybe be more specific. Okay, for a year, I think this, and this would be really helpful in your healing. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But, Bethany, I don't know if you had this in your bio. Do you have any books that you've written or published at this point? Or do you have plans?
I have plans to write a book in the next 18 months or so, start that project. But for me is my masterclass, which is Break the Cycle, and that can be found on my website.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. Well, when you have a book out in the world, please email me so I can go back and add it to the show notes later. Because I also
of course,
attaching my podcast to my blog at some point, and I can keep updating it with what you have going on and stuff. Yeah. Any major takeaways of inspiration that you want to leave us with today?
I would encourage anybody that's listening that if they believe that a healthy relationship isn't possible for them after abuse or trauma, to reconsider. And it's very hard when you have been beaten down and you feel like, somehow you're defective or you're different than other people, or why does everybody else seem to find a great relationship and I don't? To remember that you were born into this world as pure loving energy or pure awareness. And what if the partners that you've met up until this point were in a weird, twisted way helping you remember who you really are? What if your partners in your past were really guiding you to really wake up and do your own healing? Can you see it that way? And to never allow your heart to close all the way or permanently, and to write off love as too hard or not worth it, because then your past is winning and your past is controlling your future. So that's what I would say to anybody listening.
I think that's very beautifully said. I really appreciate that. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bethany, for being on our show today.
Thank you, Karen, for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, and one more thing I did forget. I'm sorry. How do you want me to reach out to you if they would like to learn more about you or work with you?
Sure. They two places. They can go to bethanydotson.com. There is a link to watch my masterclass, and that's about 45 minutes to talk about and the shifts of the methodologies we use. They can book a free discovery call. The other place that they can connect with me is through Facebook. Just type in Bethany Dotson. They can either friend request me or follow me on my business page, which is also Bethany Dotson. Bethany Dotson Relationship Coach, I think is what it is.
All right. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.